Welcome back, guys. Now we're going to talk about something called interval training. In our last video, we talked about cardiovascular training in the sense of something known as steady state exercise. This is performing exercise at about the same rate over a long period of time, anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes. Now, when we talk about interval training, we're talking about much shorter increments of time. Often these all-out sprints are done in periods of about 20 seconds to 10 seconds of rest, meaning that we repeat that very short but very high-intensity sprint as hard as our body can go, but in a shorter duration of time. The original experiment that I like to refer to was done by a man named Dr. Tabata, and the Tabata method that came out of this was done 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off, for a total of 4 minutes, or just 8 repetitions. They compared an experimental group which did that method to a group that did very traditional steady state training as we described in our last video. What they found was the VO2 max, which is how well our body is processing the oxygen in terms of absolute energy, a very great indicator of cardiovascular fitness, was almost the exact same in growth between those two groups as they did this, I believe, over an 8-week period. The difference was the group that was doing the sprint training also improved something known as their anaerobic threshold. This is the ability of our body to turn over that high-intensity energy group. So, if I'm going at an all-out sprint, I always have to take a rest afterwards before I'm able to do it again. People who sprint, break, develop an ability to do this more repetitively with less breaks. So for sports where you have to be able to turn it on as fast as you can and then recover quickly, this is an extremely useful way of training. So you'll often see people doing this for sports like football, soccer, and different martial arts type sports because of that intensity change that you'll often see, where people will go at their highest intensity for periods of time and then have to recover or turn over as fast as humanly possible. So, that is one of my absolute favorite methods of training, not only because it's great for improving my cardiovascular endurance, but a lot of the sports that I like to participate in, like soccer and martial arts, happen to demand things like this. So, if I'm able to turn over that very quickly, it makes it much easier for me to practice multiple rounds in a row without feeling absolutely gassed at the end of things. So, Tabata method is one of a variety of different ways to do HIIT training, which is known as high intensity interval training. When you're doing HIIT training, you'll often find that you can't go as long, but you get almost as great a benefit. Now, this is absolutely fantastic for people who are trying to do a whole lot of exercise in a very short period of time, people with busy schedules, or just people who get bored with their exercise. Now, the problem is, because I'm not going for as long, I'm not going to burn the absolute same amount of calories as if I were going for 30 to 60 minutes of exercise. So I'll often incorporate this on a day where I have training where I'm doing more of a resistance training exercise, what we covered in our first sequence of videos, that weightlifting type activity. So this way I can get a good amount of cardiovascular improvement as well as my resistance done in one day without having to kill a whole ton of time. This can be a really nice way for us to incorporate a lot into a short sequence, and that's just something that works very well for me because of how my scheduling works. I have a whole lot of what I consider extracurriculars still, despite the fact that I have a full-time job. So it lets me get in a lot more while putting in a lot less. That said, for people who are working more on weight loss, this might not be the ideal type of training. However, depending on what sport you're going for, this might be something that's at least worth incorporating. We found the body is able to adapt multiple systems at once. So if you're spending some days doing that really long, drawn-out period of exercise, on some days you don't have time, it's okay to intersperse days like HIIT intervals with those long intervals that allow you to get a little bit more out of your weekly workout routine without having to kind of just give up on the days where you just don't have that time, or dedicate yourself to only one mode of exercise. My exercise tends to be split into a couple different days, where I do some days of resistance training, some days focused on cardio. I do some days where I just go and box, and some days where I tend to do more with TSL and spend about 2 hours in the park playing with those guys. There's nothing wrong with any of those different things, and mixing them all together just makes your body more adaptable. This can be absolutely phenomenal for a lot of people, and it just depends on what your goals are. So, for people with weight loss goals, long steady state periods may in fact be better. However, if you don't have the time, or if your goals also involve a sport, it's often good to include things like HIIT training. Another thing you can do with HIIT interval training is take some of the resistance training exercises and dose them that way. People who are no longer being challenged by 2 to 4 sets of anywhere from 10 to 15 repetitions might find that if they go as many times as they can in a 20-second period, take that 10 seconds off and just repeat it for that 8 sets, will often find that they are, again, exhausted in a way that they haven't been in a while. And for people who are having a hard time going over a plateau or challenging themselves, this can be a nice way to change out your workout routine. So, again, the Tabata method is nice and simple. 20-second all-out sprint, everything you have, and then 10 seconds of either relative, meaning you can walk around, you can do a lighter pace, or absolute rest, meaning you just grab some water. But then as soon as that 10 seconds is done, you jump right back in at your hardest pace. Moving from there, doing a full 8 sets should take you about 4 minutes. Now you don't have to go back to back to back if you're doing multiple things over those 4 minutes, but it depends on what your goals are. Now, one of the ways I'll do some of my cardio days is I will kind of intersperse like a HIIT interval designed for cardio with something like sprints on the street or doing boxing work or jump rope work. And then as my rest interval, I'll do another 4 minutes targeting something like resistance training, whether it's curls or push-ups or rows using my TRX bands. After that, I could do another set depending on how my body's recovered. Use your body to decide where you're able to do things. If you can barely make it through those 4 minutes, you might not be ready to do this again within the same workout day. But if you're able to, go for it. So, hopefully between the couple videos we have, you guys at least have a basic idea of how you can set up a program for resistance training, making sure your body is strong, and cardiovascular training, making sure your heart and lungs are also able to keep up with the energy demands that you're outputting. If you're working on weight loss, you'll often find that the last video we did on cardiovascular training will be a little bit more helpful, but this video can help a lot of people approach those goals. If you guys have any more questions or any more specific topics you'd like to discuss, let me know. Over our next visit, we're going to talk a little bit about flexibility, and then we're also going to talk a little bit about rest periods. And after that, I'm going to try and build you guys a couple new things where we're going to take different types of exercise and learn how to grow them as your body adapts. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you again soon.